This is Progress Culture.
We get Americans excited about sustainability, off-grid energy, natural building, clean, green, like let's move forward kind of economy. The whole world will say, oh, that's the cool thing because the American kids are doing it now. All right, I want that. Mom, I don't want an iPhone. I want an aquaponics system for my birthday instead. It'll be cheaper. We can do it with 100% recycled materials.
Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss if because we're getting closer to the end, but if I feel like I want to try to touch on some of the things that you do that from your imagination as you're involved in these things, and I don't want to impose what that is on you. So feel free to answer another way after this. But man, I'd love to hear you talk about your treating plants like people and talking to them and learning them in that way. I feel like that's a different approach.
yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I guess that kind of it opens up a whole different just way of approaching life, you know. And this perspective really got put into my face by a great teacher and thinker and just incredible spiritual giant of a human being, Frank Cook.
Okay. And
I never actually got to meet him, but through YouTube videos and hearing stories from friends of his, got to kind of distill some of what I feel are like the most essential of the messages that he was really bringing into the world. And one of those, the very first one for me, is to treat plants like people, to remember that these plants have their own awareness, they have their own lives to live, they're making decisions every day, they can be influenced by our energy and the way that we interact with them. And so when you treat a plant like a being, because one of the big things that I teach a lot is like plant identification, foraging, and herbalism, and how we can identify these plants and process them into food and medicine and, shelter and fire and all kinds of other things. Everything that human beings need comes either directly or indirectly from plants. 100%. The houses that we live in, even if you look at what about all the plastic that we depend on? Well, that's ancient plants. That's plants from 50 million to 300 million years ago that have been composted in a very particular situation. So we owe everything to plants. So that's another one of the things that I always encourage is give thanks to the plants and be grateful to them. And and on that level, I'm always encouraging people to teach others, that each one teach 10 is one of the big things that Frank was really adamant about. And I think that when we acknowledge the plants as people, then all of a sudden teaching isn't this formal, heady, academic cerebral thing that's let me get out my notebook and drop down.
Well, not only that, but when it's what we've talked about it in different ways on here, and I touched on it earlier, but when you have those parameters, when you're going to that book, well, I don't want to say it's a book because it doesn't have to be a book, but the concept that here is what this thing is and here is what it does, and I know that because this set of information says that.
Right.
When you enter into a situation, whether it be with the plants or with the music or with the networks on dealing with the politics and the communities and stuff, you're not imposing what somebody else told you that it was. You're giving it a chance to show you what it is and find out something that's maybe different or new that somebody else hadn't recognized. I'm sure that you've discovered things by doing that were sort of outside of the knowledge that you were receiving from other sources. This is the source of the knowledge. This plant growing in the ground. Man, I remember one night when I was at Will's house when you were living there, and I hadn't come inside yet, or I was leaving. It was pitch black, and I was sitting outside playing with the different sounds that I was hearing, and whether or not it was the wind or these insects. And man, there was like this cricket or this beetle or something that was right in front of me somewhere that I couldn't see, just going like that was it. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? How do I interact with this thing that's just but I learned, because I accepted that it wasn't just a noise that I couldn't do anything with. I listened to it and engaged with it in a way that now I can understand that sound is actually more encompassing than anything that I was doing. You know, and not that you know, that's a separate part of the conversation here, but I think it applies to what we're talking about. Like, if you sort of take the time to assess what things really are from learning from them, as opposed to the sets of information that you're given, that you're gonna find something else, and you might even enter into a practice that provides positive benefits for the whole world. I mean, with the like you're saying, man, we could teach 10 people this stuff, and over a decade, it might change the world, and that could happen. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, and that brings up a great element as well, which is that, you know, a lot of people, when they start getting into wild plant identification, the first question is, what's its name and how can I use it? And so it's like it becomes this usury sort of a thing of just like, you know, that like manifest destiny attitude that's gotten us into so much trouble. Where
Same
it's
thing
like,
we were talking about earlier.
I am human, this is for me. Rather than we are both individuals entering into relationship, entering into conscious relationship. And, you know, I think that we forget that elation part of relationship, to elevate each other, to vibe each other up, to like, come on, let's keep lifting each other up, let's keep getting higher and higher together.
They're higher and higher. There is no hierarchy.
Right.
You know, we're in that. It's the circle of life we are a part of. We're not in the middle of or outside of, overseeing all of it, you know.